What's up, guys? I'm Chris Spags here, back with another Four Corners video for today's 5-game NBA slate, courtesy of Osmo.com. There's a lot of key news that we're waiting for right now, but we do know one key news item. So like this video right now and leave a comment down below. Instead of the usual, I'm going to ask you a question. What is the fantasy point production today of Enes Kanter, the most popular guy on the slate right now? Leave it in the comments down below. If you're correct or you're the closest, I'll give you a shout out in tomorrow's video. And we all know there's no better prize than a shout out for me in this video, so like it right now and leave a comment down below about Enes Kanter's fantasy points production. The first corner I'm going to hit on, though, is a game of the Wizards visiting the Suns. This one has a 231 point combined total, which is a slate high, and it represents a 7.8 point boost for Phoenix and a 2.4 point boost for Washington. Devin Booker put up 71.5 fantasy points on 39 shots, and he had a 50.8% very Harden-esque usage rate in that game. The issue to me really is whether we know that Josh Jackson is in or not. I'm going to talk more about it in a second, but as it relates to Devin Booker, I like Booker here. With his price up, though, I'd really only be willing to pay if Jackson's out, because the reason that Booker had that usage is he's the only guy who can really do anything with the ball in the Suns' rotation when Jackson isn't out there. So if Jackson is out there, it makes Booker less appealing. If Jackson's out, I would ride with Booker today because this is a much more hospitable matchup than that one versus the Jazz was. DeAndre Ayton projects for slightly more ownership than Devin Booker at 35%, but the matchup does make sense with him with how he's performed versus comparable teams and the Bulls and the Lakers. Versus the Bulls, he put up 57.5 fantasy points. Versus the Lakers, he put up 50 fantasy points. The Wizards, a very similar team to those guys, so I think you could see a ceiling day here from Ayton. I don't mind Ayton a bit, but I would prefer Booker if we do know that Josh Jackson is ruled out. Mikal Bridges projects for 24% ownership right now with all the bodies missing for the Suns, and I'm really not on that. He hasn't scored over 30 fantasy points since February 8th. That certainly could change here. This Wizards spot about as profitable as it can be, but overall, I don't think Bridges does enough on the court, so I'm not crazy about him here, and I'll probably go into the field. Bradley Beal's price is a bit more reasonable now, but his minutes are in question here on a back-to-back. They've been trickling down a little bit anyway, so there's some risk with him. The idea, though, of a Beal-Booker shootout going back and forth is super appealing and could be something that defies a fantasy day, so I think I want to match the field on Beal's 17% ownership right now, but overall, I do have some concerns about Beal in this back-to-back situation. I think it's worth muting your exposure just a little bit. It's a bounce-back spot for Thomas Bryant after he disappointed about half the field yesterday in a pretty terrible performance versus the Lakers. He's going to be at 26% ownership according to our projections right now. His price is up a little bit, so people won't be on him quite as much. I'm okay going back to him here. This is actually a better matchup than the Lakers one, so Bryant could be in a better spot here, and he has been good up until this last dud. Tomas Satoransky's rising price cuts into his upside a bit, but the situation fits. It's a poor defensive team, so we should have some assist upside. Should also have some scoring upside, so I don't mind Tomas Satoransky. He's an Iron Man as well, so the back-to-back doesn't concern me. I think it's a good spot for him, but the price, though, not going to get in a ton of lineups because of that. Jeff Green picked up the second half start for Trevor Ariza after Ariza tried to play through his groin injury and it seemed like he couldn't. So Jeff Green's in play, but he doesn't look that good. I prefer to go to Jabari Parker. I also think Bobby Portis could pick up the start again, and he's actually been pretty good in a starting lineup alongside Thomas Bryant, so I'd watch this one closely, closer to lock, but either way, I think Jeff Green is not the most interesting play out of that trio. The next corner I'm going to hit on is a game with the Blazers visiting the Bulls. This one is a 218 point combined total, which represents a 2.1 point drop for Portland, and is flat with Chicago's season average. After Jusuf Nurkic's tragic injury, Damian Lillard is literally the last man standing for the core Blazers group right now. He's averaged 1.61 fantasy points per minute and a 42.2% usage rate with no Nurkic and no CJ on the floor, which is up from 1.29 to 29.4% usage rate. At just 12% projected ownership right now, I'm going to be heavily above that with Damian Lillard. I would have featured him as the first guy today, but I just don't want to keep putting Damian Lillard out there night after night. I love Lillard in the spot. He looks fantastic to me. I think he's going to have all the usage he wants, and I think this game still could stay close enough where he gets 4 quarters a run. So Lillard to me is a smash play tonight who I would go above the field on. Seth Curry's minutes have been on the rise, and he was a popular counterpoint to a very popular TJ McConnell the other day, but the usage rate's a concern there. He got 40 minutes last game in overtime, but it's a 13.4% usage rate, so Seth Curry's still not shooting a lot. You could certainly pick up some more with Nurkic out too, but not a guy who I'd want to bank on, especially if his ownership rises and becomes a chalk play on the day. Enes Kanter's 54% ownership is currently the highest on the slate, and he's a guy I'm perfectly okay going to, despite being a very chalky play. The Bulls are giving up 46.3 rebounds per game, which is towards the higher end of the slate. It's a good spot for Kanter. He's going to get some offensive touches as well because Nurkic did do a pretty good job offensively, so Kanter's in a really good spot here. So matching the field and going above it may be the right move for Kanter because this spot is about as good as you're going to get in a debut start. Out of Mo Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu, one of those guys has to do something here. There's just so much left behind with no Nurkic and no McCollum out there. There's 37.3 points per game out of the rotation with those two guys out there, and Harkless and Aminu are getting minutes, so they could see some more shots. I'd prefer Harkless. I think he's a little more inclined to take more shots, but either guy is okay, and both are going to be slightly in play for me. I also think you could see Zach Collins or Jake Layman get going more because those two guys can score. Jake Layman's been really disappointing so far with McCollum out, but it's still a possibility he gets going, especially if he is coming off the bench. So I think these are guys I would consider today, but not guys I have a ton of confidence in. Right now, we need injury updates on Zach LaVine, Otto Porter, and Chris Dunn, and they may not come until later in the day because the Bulls are on a back-to-back, but I'd watch closely for all those. Markkanen is out. Brandon Sampson becomes a more interesting play because the Bulls have not shown they want to put Cristiano Felicio out there at all. He's just straight backing up Robin Lopez. Sampson seems like he'd be the guy who picks up Lauri Markkanen's minutes, so again, another thing to pivot to if Markkanen is ruled out. Shaq Harrison and Ryan Arcidiacono had better second halves yesterday with no Lauri out there. Harrison's projected for a lot of ownership right now with 37%. Arcidiacono I would really only play if Lauri out, and I think Harrison I would only play that much if Lauri were ruled out. Wayne Selden had 30.5 fantasy points on 8 for 15 shooting yesterday. He's a guy who looks okay to me even if Lauri's in. Obviously the other guys have to be out though too, but otherwise Selden's okay. Not a guy I'm trying to force in there necessarily, but he looks like a solid guy with some upside, just a professional scorer who also offers some peripherals. Antonio Blakeney had a good second half yesterday, and he also had a 30% usage rate overall in his 21 minutes of play. He could see some more opportunity today given that run that he had yesterday. It depends on his success though. He can always lose minutes, can always gain minutes. So Blakeney's a little more fungible piece, but I think some exposure makes sense because this matchup should allow him some more scoring upside than that one did yesterday. The next corner I want to hit on is a game with the Lakers and the Jazz. This one is a 217 point combined total, which represents a 5.1 point boost for Utah and a 10.9 point drop for the Lakers. There's no LeBron James expected, so there's a 15 point spread favoring Utah. Could get ugly here, but I think overall we have to play this one as though it stays close because after all, we did just see the Suns have a really monster fantasy performance on their side versus the Jazz in a game in which they did end up getting blown out. So this could be a spot where the Lakers have some value even on a back-to-back. But first to the Jazz side, Derek Favors would be the first guy I would look at. He's had 2 out of 3 games over 39.5 fantasy points. He's projected for 21% ownership right now. That seems fair. The backup center minutes for him should be pretty profitable, so I don't mind Derek Favors here, and I think matching the field works for me. Conversely, the 31% ownership expected for Donovan Mitchell seems really high. I'd much rather go Lillard. I'd much rather go Booker, assuming that Josh Jackson is out. Those guys are really appealing because they don't have anybody else competing for shots here, whereas Mitchell is a points-dependent guy who's also competing for opportunity with the other guys. So I don't mind Mitchell. I think you have to have some exposure if he is going to be highly owned, but not a guy I want to have at that level if the field's going to be there. For Ricky Rubio, the poor defense on the Lakers should offer some assist upside. I like Rubio a decent bit here. I think he's an interesting point guard play who does have some upside in terms of where his salary is. Overall, he's not getting a ton of minutes, so that's a bit of a risk. But this matchup does fit him pretty well, so I don't mind going to Rubio. Rudy Gobert looks solid, but again, that blowout risk means the lack of fourth quarter upside hurts him a bit. He can still get where he needs to go, and this is a slate where there aren't a lot of great center plays, so he looks okay to me, but I wouldn't want to load up on Rudy Gobert because this game really could blow out fast. And to me, Joe Ingles and Jay Crowder simply aren't doing enough outside of their scoring to trust. Not enough peripherals there. Same thing as Donovan Mitchell, just scoring, and the scoring is there for them some days, but not enough to really crash the ceiling that you want. So those guys are okay, but I wouldn't want a ton of exposure because I just don't see them as being predictably viable. Rajon Rondo's been the main beneficiary of no LeBron out there. A lot more time with the ball in his hands to both assist and shoot. So Rondo looks okay to me, and I'd go to his 28% ownership, but only if we know for sure that LeBron's out, and the expectation is that LeBron will be out, but for now, just make sure that's confirmed before you put Rondo in. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has had 3 out of 4 games with at least 15 shots, and that's resulted in 31.75 fantasy points with a ceiling of 50 fantasy points in those. So the Jazz are a tough defense, but at under 10% ownership, they taking some shots at Kentavious Caldwell-Pope makes sense because there's a lot of usage to go around here, and we just saw a volume scorer get there versus the Jazz the other day. JaVale McGee's averaging 57.8 fantasy points in 3 more hospitable spots. This Jazz team is going to be much tougher, and JaVale McGee's price is up, so I think there's a real risk reward here with McGee. If he does have that upside day, you're going to get him at a lot less ownership than he would be otherwise. If he doesn't have that upside day, you're going to be stuck with a guy with a really high salary, so play some McGee, but I would definitely be cautious overall. This may be the shortest bullet point of the year, but Kyle Kuzma just stinks. He's not doing anything right now. The usage could be there today, and really that's what matters. If he gets the shots to fall, he could have a good day, but the shots are never falling for him. He's not rebounding. He's not blocking like he did last year. He's not doing anything on the court besides shooting, so Kyle Kuzma's all right. If he has a good day, I'll look like a jerk for saying this, but he just isn't that good right now, and I don't want him. The last corner I want to hit on is a game with the Warriors at the Grizzlies. This one has a 217-point combined total, which represents a 3.8-point drop for Golden State, and it's flat with Memphis' season average. Mike Conley's questionable right now, and his status is key to watch. If he's in, he's an interesting play. If he's out, he makes everybody a lot more interesting. So Mike Conley, keep a close eye as we get news throughout the day. Delon Wright and Tyler Dorsey are very interesting if Mike Conley's out. They're the only shots the Grizzlies have at keeping this competitive. If Conley's in, they're playable, but a little bit less interesting because Conley's just going to take that usage away, take that ball handling time away. And also, Justin Holiday to me is only playable if Conley's out. He's just not doing a lot when Conley's on the floor. Bruno Caboclo had 24 points, 11 rebounds, and 47.75 fantasy points versus the Thunder, All of those are highs on the year for Bruno. The rebounds tie as a high. So it's a decent spot to go back to him if he's going to get that usage with Conley out, but I really would only want to go there if Conley's out. I think if Conley's in, Chandler Parsons becomes a more interesting play, and overall, Chandler Parsons might be a more interesting play because he's going to be a professional scoring out there versus the Warriors, who are a professional defense, and I don't think Bruno Caboclo is refined enough to have big days on a regular basis. Jonas Valanciunas has never scored over 27 fantasy points versus Golden State, and this is going back a few seasons now. Obviously, a different situation in Memphis. His minutes are more secure, but there is a real chance he gets played off the floor here because he can't switch on defense, and the Warriors, it's what they do. They just switch everybody, so there's a chance you could see Jonas give up some minutes to Ivan Robb. We're going to assume Joakim Noah is not in the game, so he can't steal minutes away, but Robb could be somebody who's a little more mobile. I think there's risk with Jonas, so I would match the field on him because he does have that upside, and the minutes are there, but overall, I think there's some risk with him today. DeMarcus Cousins is the most interesting to me on the Warriors side. The price is there. The matchup with Jonas should be a good one because he's just more athletic, but also similarly big, so he can bang and stretch him out. So I think it's a good situation for Cousins here. I don't really like Draymond Green because of Cousins being in there. I think Cousins is the guy to go to at a reasonably priced big level. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant are tough to unpack always, but I think especially tough to unpack in a spot versus Memphis. I would favor Klay Thompson here. He's had the better days versus Memphis this year, and he's also the cheapest, which is really what matters because he could have some upside theoretically. Steph Curry's okay. He can get there in any spot, and I think defensively, maybe he may struggle a bit with Delon Wright. He's been playing pretty aggressively, but overall, not enough to worry about with Steph Curry. Kevin Durant, though, I worry about a little bit. Bruno Caboclo has been harassing dudes. Paul George shot just 10 for 29 the other day versus him. I think Caboclo is actually better defensively than he may have a rep for. The singular defense doesn't matter as much for DFS, so it's not something I'm focused on, but I think he may make Kevin Durant uncomfortable. And with Durant's usage not going that high in games in which Klay and Steph are out there, I'm not dying to go to Durant when I think that Caboclo may give him some headaches. All right, so there we go. Those are my thoughts on the slate, and I do have more thoughts on the game between the Pacers and the Thunder in the link in the description. It's a game which didn't make the cut here because it's a bit of a mess, but it's still an interesting one for DFS purposes, so check that link in the description now. As I mentioned earlier in the video, please like this video right now and leave a comment down below guessing how many fantasy points Enes Kanter is going to have today. He's a popular dude. If you get it right or you get the closest out of everybody, I will give you a shout out in this video, a really good shout out to, one that I mean with all my heart. So like the video right now and leave a comment down below. And as always, use the promo code SWITCHANDHEDGE to get half off your first month at Awesemo.com. All the ownership projections I reference here, rankings from Awesemo, projections from Josh Engelman, you can plug right into Fantasy Cruncher. All of that's at your fingertips if you use that promo code. You could also get in for MLB season, which is starting off tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of content, some of which I'll be on as well. So check that promo code right now. Get in there, get half off your first month of any package. And I'll be back in tomorrow with another Four Corners video, so good luck.